I sued my boyfriend after he bought a house for me and my 3 kids, but put it in his name instead of mine. Everyone says I'm ungrateful, but they don't understand the struggles of being a single mother like me. When Gail told me he was going to buy a house for us, I felt that the universe was finally compensating me for all the years of struggle. I had met Gail 2 years after my divorce, when I still felt the bitter taste of defeat in every corner of my small rented apartment. He was stable, an engineer with a solid career, and, most importantly, he seemed to accept my children as his own. He wasn't just a boyfriend, he was a lifesaver. I remember the excitement in the eyes of Liam, my eldest son, when Gail took us to see the land. "Will I really have my own room, Mom?" he asked me, and my heart filled with a hope I hadn't felt in a decade. For months, we lived through the process. I was his partner in all of this, his confidant. We spent hours looking at plans, choosing the bathroom tiles, discussing the paint color for the children's rooms. My contribution was immense, even if it wasn't monetary. Isn't the time I invested valuable? My judgment in choosing the backyard where my children now play. The nights I massaged him after an exhausting day of meetings with the architect. I was the emotional architect of that home. I built the illusion in my children's minds. I told them we would finally have a permanent place, our real home. That was my investment. My sweat and tears were in those foundations, even if the bank papers didn't have my signature. The day of the deed signing, I dressed in a pretty dress, imagining a romantic moment, a team success. But Gail went alone. He told me it was boring paperwork and that he preferred me to stay and take care of the children. A part of me, a small, annoying voice, felt a pinch of unease, but I drowned it out. He was practical, that was all. A numbers man, he wasn't one to get carried away by sentimentality. When he returned, with a copy of the deeds in his hand, I prepared his favorite meal. We toasted with wine. The house was ours, or so I thought. The revelation came a month later in the most casual way. We were discussing home insurance, and I very naturally said, "When we get the insurance." He corrected me with a softness that I found condescending. "Honey, I'll get the insurance. It's my responsibility. The house is in my name, so it's simpler." The words in my name echoed in the room like a gunshot. The air thickened. I asked him in a voice I barely recognized as my own. What did he mean exactly by that? And he, with the same calm as always, explained that since he was the one who had put down the down payment and who was going to pay the mortgage, it was logical that the property was listed only under his name. He said it as if he were explaining something obvious to a child. Logical, as if logic had anything to do with family, with commitment, with the security of a mother and her 3 children. Now I live in this house that is not mine. I walk on floors that technically do not belong to me. I hang pictures of my children on walls where I am only, according to the law, a guest. And every time I pay the utilities or buy food for everyone with my money, I feel like I'm throwing my bills into a bottomless pit. Gail acts as if nothing has happened. He tells me he loves me, that this is our home, and that I shouldn't worry about legal nonsense. But they're not nonsense. It is my life, it is the future of my children. What if he gets tired of me? If in 5 years he decides he wants something else, he will throw me out on the street with my 3 children. I cannot allow his logic to jeopardize the stability that cost me so much to build. In the end, it is for the safety of my children. It is always for them. My indignation began to grow like a weed, poisoning every seemingly happy moment. I began to observe each of his actions in a new light, looking for confirmation that his decision had been a calculated act of selfishness. When he came home late from work, I no longer saw a dedicated man, but someone who prioritized his career over the family he had promised to build. If he forgot to buy milk, it was not a simple oversight. It was a sign of his lack of real commitment to our daily well-being. My mind became a courtroom where he was always in the dock and I was the judge and jury, convicting him with circumstantial evidence that only I could see. I tried to bring up the subject on several occasions, always with the excuse of future planning. "Gail, don't you think it would be fairer, in case something happens, for the house to be in both our names?" His answer was always a cotton wall. He would stroke my hair and tell me not to be catastrophic, that nothing was going to happen, that we were a family and that this was our home forever. His words, meant to calm me, only managed to enrage me more. Why couldn't he understand that forever is an empty promise without legal backing? Why didn't my peace of mind, the safety of my children, deserve the simple gesture of adding my name to a document? His refusal to even consider it began to feel like contempt, a way of telling me that my place in this house was conditional, subject to his good mood and his continued affection. It was then that I called my ex-husband Marcos. I needed validation from someone who, despite our problems, knew the struggle of being a parent. I told him the situation expecting his solidarity, but Marcos, as always, was brutally practical. Of course he put it in his name, he said without blinking. He put up the money, he assumes the risk. It's the smartest thing. Would you have put an apartment in a boyfriend's name? His words pierced me. It was not the answer I wanted. I wanted someone to confirm that I was being the victim of an injustice, not to be reminded of the harsh economic reality. I hung up feeling more alone than ever, betrayed by the male logic that seemed like an exclusive club I would never be a part of. That conversation with Marcos, however, did not make me reconsider. On the contrary, it hardened my position. If the world was designed for men to protect their assets while we wore ourselves out with emotional care, then I would have to play dirty. I started researching online. I read forum after forum, article after article. I read about common law unions, about payments in kind, about any legal loophole that could give me some right to the property. I never did it out of greed. I did it because of that feeling of vertigo that invaded me every time Gail left the house, and I was left alone between these four walls that at any moment could cease to be my refuge. In the end, it is for the safety of my children. That phrase became my mantra, the shield that protected me from any doubt about the morality of my growing plans. Every payment I made for the house services, every grocery purchase I meticulously recorded in a notebook hidden in my underwear. They were no longer shared expenses of a life together. They were evidence. They were my contribution to a home that refused to recognize me as a co-owner. I started refusing to pay for anything that wasn't strictly for the children or for me. If he was the owner, he should bear all the costs. It was a cold and silent war. Gail noticed the change. Of course. He asked me if I was okay, if something had happened. I told him I was just tired. The truth was that I was accumulating ammunition for a battle that he didn't even know he was fighting. The turning point came on a Saturday morning. My middle daughter, Valeria, 7 years old, was playing in the garden and accidentally broke one of the small solar lights that lined the path. Gail, who was pruning a bush, let out a sigh of frustration. "Valeria, be careful. These things cost money," he said in a sterner tone than usual. It was a normal reaction, I know, but in my state of hypervigilance, those words were the spark that lit the prairie. I approached like a lioness protecting her cub. "Don't talk to her like that," I snapped. "It's just a light. It's not like she's scratching a wall of your house." The emphasis I put on your house hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Gail looked at me confused. "Clara, what are you talking about?" "It's our house." "Really, Gail?" I blurted out, and I could no longer contain all the resentment I had been storing. "It's our house when one of the girls breaks something. But it's your house when the bank calls. It's our house when it's time to clean and cook, but is it your house when it's time to pay the mortgage?" The argument escalated quickly. It was no longer about the solar light, it was about everything. I recited one by one all the injustices I had catalogued in my mind. I told him about my sleepless nights massaging his back during the construction. I reminded him how I had convinced my children that this was their home forever. I threw in his face every practical comment, every refusal to talk about the papers, every time I had felt like a tenant instead of a life partner. "Don't you trust me?" I shouted with tears of rage running down my cheeks. "You brought my children here, you gave them a home, and now you have us living under your roof as if we were pets you can return to the pound if you get tired of us." He turned pale. He looked at me as if he didn't know me. "My God, Clara," he said in a voice hoarse with disbelief. "Do you really think that? Do you really believe I'm capable of kicking them out? I love you. I love your children. The house is in my name because I put my whole life savings into it, because my credit is what qualified for the mortgage. It's a formality. A detail. A detail for him. It was a detail. For me, it was the difference between security and homelessness. That word detail sealed his fate in my mind. He was not the understanding man I thought he was. He was just another man who underestimated a mother's constant terror of not being able to provide for her children. That night, I didn't sleep in our room. I lay in the bed in the guest room, which suddenly felt like a cell. There was no turning back. The confrontation had happened, and he had not given in. He had not admitted his mistake. He had not promised to fix it. He had limited himself to defending himself, to justifying his logic. My heart, which had previously harbored doubts, hardened completely. If conversation didn't work, I would have to use other means. I didn't do it for revenge. I didn't do it for greed. In the end, it is for the safety of my children. If he was not able to understand it voluntarily, the law would have to make him understand. The next morning was glacial. Gail tried to approach me, speaking in a low and conciliatory tone. "Clara, I don't want to fight. Let's talk about this like adults. Maybe we can see a counselor to convince me that my fears were irrational, to help me accept my subordinate position in this dynamic." I looked him in the eye and knew I couldn't trust his solution. His piece was a trap. "There's nothing to talk about," I told him with a coldness that surprised myself. "You have made your position very clear. I have to protect mine." That same afternoon, while he was at work, I made the call. I searched online for family lawyers and dialed the number of the first firm that seemed aggressive enough. I made an appointment for the following week, inventing an excuse about a commitment with my ex-husband to leave the house. Sitting across the polished wooden desk of the lawyer, a man in his 50s named Esteban Rojas, I presented my case. I told him about my emotional contribution, about managing the household, about how I had improved the property with my unpaid work, about the utility payments I had made. I showed him my account book. He listened, making occasional notes. His face was an impassive well. When I finished, he took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Mrs. Clara," he began, and his tone already told me everything. "What you describe is, unfortunately, a very common situation. However, from a purely legal point of view, your position is extremely weak. Since you are not married and your name is not on the deed, you have no property rights. Your in-kind contributions, unless they can be proven as direct payments to the mortgage or substantial and documented improvements, are not usually considered by a judge as a basis for a co-ownership claim." His words were darts of ice, extremely weak. "You have no rights." I felt the floor open up under my feet. All my resentment, my righteous indignation, was crashing against the wall of the law. The lawyer continued, suggesting that the only thing I could do was try mediation to reach an out-of-court settlement, but he warned me that without real legal leverage, my negotiating power was almost nil. I got up from the chair feeling humiliated and furious. I was not angry with the lawyer, not even with the law. My rage, irrational and total, turned against Gale. He was the culprit. He, with his logic and his common sense, had placed me in this position of helplessness. He knew that the law was on his side, and that is why he had been so calm, so condescending. He had set a trap for me from the beginning. I returned to his house, with a poisoned soul. Gale was waiting for me on the sofa, with a genuinely worried expression. "How did it go with Marcos?" he asked. The lie I had used to get out burned on my lips. I couldn't hold it in anymore. "I wasn't with Marcos," I said, dropping my bag on the table with a thud. "I was with a lawyer. I was telling him how the man who says he loves us has put my children and me in a situation of total vulnerability." The silence that followed was more eloquent than any scream. The disappointment in his eyes was so deep that it almost managed to pierce my shell of resentment. Almost. Now the house is not just a place that doesn't belong to me, it's a silent battlefield. Gale no longer tries to talk. He has retreated into a cold courtesy. He pays all the bills without saying a word. He no longer asks me to contribute. And that gesture, which I would have longed for before, now I feel as a constant reminder of my dependence. It's his way of saying, "Very well, if this is the war you want, these are the rules." My children notice the tension. Liam has asked me if Gale is angry with us. I tell him no, that adults sometimes have problems, but he looks at me skeptically. I am destroying the stability I so wanted to protect, and a part of me knows it, but it's a part one no longer listened to. People will tell me I'm crazy, a gold digger, that I should be grateful that a man accepted my 3 children and gave them a magnificent roof over their heads. But that is to understand nothing. Gratitude doesn't pay the rent if things go wrong. Gratitude is not a legal document. Is my emotional work, my dedication as a mother and partner, worthless? Is only the money deposited in the bank valuable? I have invested my youth, my energy, my love in this family. I have built a home around him, and now I am told that if he leaves, I have nothing left. How can I not feel that this is a monumental injustice? Sometimes, in my lowest moments, I wonder if I exaggerated, if my fear blinded me, but then I remember the condescension in his voice when he said it was a detail. I remember the coldness of the lawyer saying, "You have no rights." And the fear returns 10 times worse. I can't back down. No, now I did what any mother would do. I faced the lion that guards the door of our golden cage. The fact that the lion turned out to be the man who sleeps next to me is a tragedy, but it is not my fault. I just wanted guarantees. I wanted to feel that this home that I helped build in every fiber of my being was as much mine as it was his. I don't know what will happen now. Mediation is an option, but I know it will be useless. He holds all the cards. Maybe I'll have to leave. Maybe I'll have to drag my children back to the uncertainty of a rented apartment with a broken heart and shattered pride. But if I go, I will go knowing that I fought, that I did not settle for being a guest in my own children's lives, that I tried, against all odds, against the cold logic of men and laws, to secure their future. In the end, it is for the safety of my children. I repeat that phrase like a spell so as not to drown in doubt. It is my truth. It is the only truth I have left. Popular Reddit comments on the main story. Anonymous user, your ability to twist reality is worthy of study. You invest $0 in the property, but you demand co-ownership rights because you chose the tiles, massaged his back, built the illusion of a home. That's called being a supportive partner, not an investor. Gail assumed all the financial risk, a risk you are curiously enjoying by living there for free. Your fear is understandable, but your solution is emotional extortion disguised as maternal love. You don't want security, you want a blank check secured by his work. Response from the app. Extortion. Seriously, since when is fighting not to end up on the street with 3 children extortion? You don't understand. It's not about the money, it's about peace of mind. It's about not feeling that every argument can end with "it's my house, get out, my emotional work does have value." Or is raising his children to be emotionally stable, maintaining a functional home, and being his support worth nothing. Just because it doesn't have a price on the market doesn't mean it's not an investment. In the end, it is for the safety of my children. Anonymous user, let's analyze your investment. You note every utility payment in a notebook as evidence, but you live in a house for which you pay no rent. Do you know how many people would kill for that opportunity? Gail doesn't have you as a guest. He has you as the woman he loves and whom, because of that love, he is pulling out of precarity. Your argument falls apart when you admit that you refuse to pay shared expenses. You want the rights of a wife with the responsibilities of a girlfriend. That's not being a martyr, it's being an opportunist. Anonymous user, there is a word for what you describe. Cohabitation. Millions of couples do it without demanding ownership of the other person's property. If your fear was so deep, the logical thing would have been a cohabitation agreement in writing before moving in, not a lawsuit after you settled in. You use your children as a human shield to justify a greed that you don't even want to admit to yourself. Gail is not the problem. The problem is your deep sense of entitlement to what does not belong to you and your refusal to see how your actions are destroying the very home. What do you say? Protect. Response from the app to I did not use my children. I am protecting them. You speak from the comfort of not knowing what it is to raise children with another man and feel that the ground can open up under your feet at any moment. A cohabitation agreement, yes, he would never have signed it. He always said, "This is our home," to reassure me. But when the moment of truth came, he hid behind the papers. I'm just trying to make his words match his actions. If that makes me an opportunist, then so be it. I'd rather be that than a fool who trusted and ended up on the street. Update 1. I showed the Redditaga comments to him. It was a catastrophic mistake. I thought that seeing that strangers could understand my point of view, maybe he would soften. I sent them to him via WhatsApp with a message that said, "So you can see I'm not that crazy." His response was not a message, it was him coming home an hour later with his face like a stone mask. He threw his laptop on the dining room table and told me with a frightening calm, "So this is your war, taking our problems to internet forums so strangers can lynch me virtually." I tried to explain, to tell him I was just looking for perspectives, but he wouldn't hear it. He opened his laptop and in front of me, he started reading the comments out loud. Not the ones that supported me, no. He chose the most critical, the harshest ones. Opportunist, he read. Emotional extortion. You use your children as a shield. Every word was a lash. Do you agree with this, Clara? He would ask me, staring at me. Do you think I'm a monster who sets traps for you? I shrank on the couch, feeling smaller and more exposed than ever. My virtual sanctuary had turned against me. Then came the ultimatum. It wasn't a shout, it was something worse. It was a serene and definitive statement. It's over. Clara. The mediation is over. The lawyers are over. This farce is over. You have two options. Option. You immediately drop this victim attitude and this obsession with the house. You accept that this is our home, and you stop poisoning it with your distrust. We go to couples therapy together, and we work on this for real. Oh, option B. He paused, taking a breath. Option B. You get yourself a real lawyer, because I'll get mine. And then yes, you'll have your legal battle, but it won't be for the house, it will be for the custody of the children. The word custody froze my blood. It wasn't possible. He wasn't their father. You can't. You have no right over them. I stammered. No, he admitted. But I can argue to a judge that their mother is mentally unstable, that she is so obsessed with the material good that she is willing to destroy the family she claims to protect. With the comments from your post as proof. Do you want to play that game? Clara, I was breathless. Never in a million years did I think Gale could be so cold, so calculating. He had used my own arsenal against me. Now I'm trapped. If I choose option A, it's admitting my total defeat. I'll have to live here under his roof, swallowing my pride and my fear, pretending to trust the man who threatened to take my children from me. If I choose B, I embark on a war that I will probably lose, spending the few savings I have on lawyers, with the real risk that a judge will question my mental stability. He turned my fight for security into the biggest threat to it. And the worst part is that deep down I know I deserved it for underestimating him. I played the lawyer and I woke up the engineer who calculates everything, and his calculation was perfect. Popular Reddit comments on the update. 1. Anonymous user. Welcome to the consequences of your actions. You took the conflict to a public sphere and Gale intelligently decided to play on the same field. His custody threat is nothing more than the legal counterpart to your own unfounded demand. You initiated this legal process by consulting a lawyer. He is simply defining the terms of the battle you chose. It is cynical that you now complain that the fight is dirty when you started building your case with massages and tiles as evidence. Anonymous user, this is no longer about the house. This is about control. You wanted control over the property to calm your insecurities. When you didn't get it, you escalated. Gale, feeling cornered and betrayed, responded by seeking control over what hurts you the most. Your relationship with your children is a toxic dynamic at its peak. Neither of you is thinking about the well-being of those children. You use them as a justification, and he is a weapon. It's pathetic and sad. Response from the app to I would never use them as a weapon. He did. I just wanted a piece of paper that said this is my home too. Is that so terrible? He's the one who turned this into a nuclear war. I only had a water pistol and he brought out a missile. How dare he suggest I'm not a stable mother? I have raised my children alone for years. He has only been in their lives for 2. His conditional love is the problem, not my fear. Anonymous user, the most ironic twist is that Gale is offering you exactly what you say you want. Security. Option A is security. A stable home, a relationship to work on, a father figure for your children, but you reject it because that security doesn't come with a property title. That shows that deep down it was never about peace of mind. It was about the title. It was about winning. And now that you've run into a better player, you cry. Choose therapy. It's your only real way out. Response from the app. Winning. You think this is a game to me? It's my life. Therapy would be surrendering. It would be admitting that my fears are invalid and that his control over my life is total. How can I trust a man who uses the custody of my children as a bargaining chip? That is not a basis for a relationship. It is a concentration camp with a backyard. You don't understand that sometimes the safe option is the one that imprisons you the most. Final update. I chose not A or B. I chose C, one he had not foreseen. I packed, not in a dramatic outburst, but with a funereal meticulousness. While Gail was at the office, I put our lives into suitcases and cardboard boxes, clothes, toys, photos. I left everything he had bought us, the big TV, the expensive dinnerware, the decorations. I only took what was ours before him, what was mine. When my children arrived from school with confused faces, I told them the hardest lie of my life. We're going on an adventure to a new place, just the four of us. The illusion I once built for this house, I now had to build for an uncertain future and a small apartment I had rented in an emergency that will consume almost my entire salary. I left a note on the kitchen counter. That marble countertop that I chose myself. It wasn't long, it said, Gail, I'm leaving your house. I hope your logic and your papers keep you warm at night. We cannot be hostages of your conditional love. Don't look for me. The lawyers will handle the custody issue if you insist. But I warn you, I will fight tooth and nail for my children. In the end, it has always been for them. The catalytic event, the final twist, was not a reconciliation or a legal victory. It was my escape. It was realizing that I was so obsessed with owning the ship that I preferred to sink it and swim towards an uncertain iceberg rather than share the helm. By leaving, I stole his power. I took away his main weapon, the threat of kicking us out. I kicked myself out, and in that self-destructive act, I found a twisted victory. Now the insecurity is real, tangible. The rent, the bills, the small space, but it is my insecurity. It no longer depends on a man's mood. The paradox is that by immersing myself in the true precarity I feared so much, I freed myself from the suffocation of his security. He tried to call me dozens of times. He sent messages begging me to reconsider, to talk again, that therapy was still an option, but he had contaminated it. Therapy would now be a place where he would try to cure me of my irrational fears, and I would have to pretend that his custody threat was an understandable outburst. I couldn't. I had crossed a Rubicon of resentment from which there was no return. I blocked his number. The next communication would be, if he decided, through a court. That is the peace I have chosen, the peace of the Cold War. Now, in this tiny apartment, with my children sleeping on mattresses on the floor, because the rooms are not enough, I look around. It's a disaster, it's terrifying, it's the materialization of all my worst fears. And yet, when Liam hugged me today and said, I missed you, Mom. Even though we lived in the same house, I knew I had made the right decision. I'd rather be the owner of this chaos than a prisoner in a palace. Gail can keep his perfect house, with its walls that no longer hold my children's laughter. He is left with an empty shell, and I, although I have lost material security, have reconquered my agency. It is a Pyrrhic victory, poisoned and sad, but at least it is mine in the end. It was for the safety of my children, the security of growing up with a mother who prefers the uncertain struggle to safe submission. Popular Reddit comments on the final update. Anonymous user, you've done it. You have achieved the security you said you were looking for, an absolute situation of financial and emotional instability for your children. You have interpreted an act of self-preservation, fleeing from a conflict that you yourself escalated as an epic triumph. You did not reconquer your agency. You surrendered to your demons. Gail offered you a way out with therapy, a path to heal the distrust, and you rejected it because your pride could not accept that you had to work on the problem, not just win the argument. Anonymous user, the real tragedy here are those 3 children. Their stable home destroyed because their mother could not stand not being on a deed. You have exchanged a backyard for a cramped apartment, a father figure for a resentful mother, and stability for agency. I hope that agency is worth it. When the bills come at the end of the month and your children ask you when they will see Gail again, You have confused having control over your life with being right at any cost, and the cost is being paid by them. Response from the app. It's worth it. They are worth every tear and every sleepless night. Do you think I don't know it's difficult? Of course I do, but before I was dying inside. Now at least I'm fighting on the outside. My children don't need a big garden, they need me. Whole without that poison of resentment running through me. I'd 1,000 times rather they see me fight with dignity than kneel for comfort. One day they will understand. Anonymous user, this is not an ending, it is an interlude. The emotional bill for this flight to freedom will come. It will come when your children miss their old life, when you realize the economic burden you have chosen, when loneliness hits you without the safety net you despised. You have not won, you have removed the blindfold to stick a stake in your heart, and you call it liberation. The true narrative of a strong woman is not the one who flees, but the one who stays to face her problems. You just ran. Response from the app. Running from a place where they make you feel you don't belong is not cowardice, it's survival instinct. He was not a safety net, he was a trap. And yes, the bill will come, but I will pay it with my hands, with my work, with my pain. But it will be my bill, not the debt of eternal gratitude to a man who thought he could buy my submission with 4 walls. That is priceless.